there's been talks over how many UDSs now about moving to to some greater size. I've heard some talks the last couple of days about pros and cons of that, but I'm curious what other people have to say pro and con wise, and then we'll get into some of the other ones I've heard. So does anyone have strong opinions for staying with the physical CD and reasons why?
Yeah, that's bandwidth. Even parts of Australia still can't get adequate broadband.
I'd like to fix the Australia problem first.
No. No, but like, my point is, there's still parts of the world that do not have the
Agreed.
bandwidth that we do.
So it's the by default part that I think is important in that statement. So what if we did a by default, there is a possibility of offering a CD even of reduced size too. Yeah. So you could offer two. You can offer some DVD image that is the default, but you can offer a reduced experience as well. So,
but like, would we be testing this like both images, or would like the small one be second class?
It's a TBD because more of it. We'd have to put that on the table, saying if we want to make this decision, that might be a parameter that we use. So, you had your hand raised.
I mean, with any increase in size, we're increasing the amount of time it takes for people to get and install Ubuntu.
Yeah.
And I don't think the benefits of having a few extra applications outweighs the benefit of having something very small that people can get quite quickly and get up and running quite quickly.
So, what's very small in your mind?
Well, currently the Ruby installs are about 450 megs of download, and then a few minutes of installation thereof. So
what if it was a little clearer that 1.5 gigabytes is the new limit, but that's not the goal. The goal is if we have a 700 meg CD, we have some sort of a phase plan.
If you make something the new limit, then it will quickly hit that limit.
Yeah.
We've been down this road before, and people are chomping at the bit trying to get more on there. I think it will be quite difficult to hold them back and say, well, what we're really trying to do is stay at 700 megs. If you look at some of our competitors, like if you look at Fedora, it takes ages to get Fedora and install Fedora because you've got to download an entire DVD's worth of content. And even on a fast connection, even on a cable internet connection, that's quite a while. I think if we do go down this road of doing, or at least considering a 1.5 gigabyte image, we should do some proper A/B testing. We should work with the web team and have them set up something whereby, because one of their things is, I think John Oxton has a work item for making the beta releases actually on the Ubuntu main website instead of being this horrendous mess of wiki pages and CD image pages, so that people can actually get to them. Because we had a number of issues with journalists not being able to actually get and install the beta because of directions for those who are just horrendous. But working with that to do A/B testing so that maybe we're giving a certain subset of people the 1.5 gigabyte images during the first beta, and another subset the 700 meg images, and actually seeing how many people actually go and download them. We could actually get fancier and see how many people install them, but I don't know if the metrics is going to be up and running by that point.
That's interesting, actually, A/B testing who downloads the class. So. Okay. Other comments?
For the development meeting, USB versus DVD, here's your thoughts on that.
Well, it'd be targeting. The idea is we're targeting USB. I think most people are going. The world's going to USB installs. DVDs there more as like that's the next physical limit. But we obviously are not making 4.7 gigabyte image. It's targeting 2 gigabytes, the smallest possible cheap USBs. Maybe the thought.
How common is the DVD drive now?
I don't have numbers on it, but
yeah,
seems like it's going away. Steve?
Well, I didn't hear the question.
Oh no! I thought you had a comment.
Well, I was going to just stick in randomly. I am wondering though. So this has got scheduled opposite the Pangolin release planning session. So Colin and Martin cannot be here. Do you have the necessary viewpoints that you're looking for in this?
I can represent Martin's. I can't represent Colin's. I don't have his.
I'm being asked to go back to that one as well, so I'm not going to be your Colin proxy.
Ultimately, it's going to be Mark's decision anyway. I'm just gathering feedback.
Okay.
So, I think that we can safely say that I can go get Colin's feedback.
Okay. Or do we want to possibly do this session again later, or instead later?
Anyway, I have no strong opinions on that one way or another. I don't know if we got everyone here, we just get it and move on.
I'll leave it then.
All right, we'll do that. Thanks.
So, what's pushing this other than Mark? Like, what can we currently fit?
Other than what?
What's pushing this other than Mark?
No, Mark actually wants us to stay physical CD. We've been pushing for that for a little while. We just run into a lot of challenges each cycle where when it's a physical limit, you've got no leeway. So as an engineering principle, when you put up against one of those, it's very difficult when you have no alternate paths of things. So for instance, if you've come up to a point in time where there's 702 megs, you just no chance. There's no pragmatic decision you can take other than you start looking for things to boot. So I can understand it as a discipline to that, but it takes the decision-making criteria out of the business and it puts it in the hands of something that's different. Now, since we said that that's a business goal, that's fine, but if we're changing it around from the business and community goal to saying we want to actually have the best experience, they may be diametrically opposed at times. Best experience versus size.
Well, keeping in mind that it plays into other areas as well, like boot speed is directly related to this because the more stuff that you have to load into the larger your applications, the more that you have to load on boot.
Not necessarily boot. I mean, I can see where it could affect boot, but the thing you're adding is an Inkscape or something like that. Just as a point of argument, it doesn't necessarily affect boot, but could potentially affect boot speed.
And installation time as well.
Yes, it definitely would affect installation time.
One thing that
We'll go with the hand raised one first.
go for it.
Okay, I think I'd like to make 2 points. First one, I think we have like the Star Wars problem where the first 3 made Star Wars were made on constraints that forced the makers to be really creative and made this really great movie, whereas the next 3 were made on unlimited budget and unlimited technology, and we get episodes 1, 2, 3. And so, like the constraint of the CD is really awesome because we have things like the talk yesterday to switch all the default Python applications to Python 3, so that really pushes us forward. It forces us to do something creative like port everything to Python 3, which is really great. As opposed to, if we had a 1.5 CD, we might not even entertain that because it doesn't buy us very much for the effort. But at the same time, like I remember when a 4 meg floppy disk was, a lot of space and you could put a whole OS on it. And at some point in time, 720 megs is going to be, such a small insignificant amount of data that you can't fit an OS on it. So, I think the real question is eventually we have to move to a DVD because technology expands but I think the real question, are we at that point that technology has moved beyond a 720 meg operating system being really a viable option to the point where some people are talking about taking LibreOffice off, not because it adds a usability feature, but because it would free up the CD. So we start making bad usability decisions just to meet the 720 meg constraint. So are we at that point?
I think the second question is the interesting one because I do think the pace of technology, pace of innovation will eventually push us past where CD is relevant anymore, either from an industry uses it or there's just a physical possibility of us maintaining that.
Yes.
So answering that question is, are we at that point? Is the more critical one. To your first point about the Star Wars analogy, which is an awesome analogy, by the way, I do think it's a little different in this case because we aren't going from 700 to 4.7, which I would equate to essentially the Star Wars. We've taken the prudent approach that joke grouping sucks, and we know we don't want that in there, and we're going to try to limit the size. But we're still putting other things in there because we are a big budget. We have a bigger budget movie at that point, but not huge.
Yeah,
so I think I can see the correlation with, you know what I'm saying?
I have, machines that are probably too old to really run Ubuntu. They're just that old, and they have DVD drives on them, so I don't think whether or not someone actually has a DVD drive is an issue, because if they don't, their machine's probably not going to run.
Well, I think the DVD drive is more about where it's going from this point forward, rather than legacy, because DVDs have been around for a decade. So there's tons of DVD drives out there, and those are always going to be around. But you know, how many MacBook Airs, the Samsungs, the other small sub books like that, they don't have CD or DVD drives, and no one's going to be shipping them Blu-rays and stuff like that. So I think the future is not to have physical drives like that anymore. Take up too much battery and things like that. Yeah.
So do we ever see a point where we won't even have CD? We won't even have USB drives.
Say again, Luke?
Do you think like we're saying that, you know, the CD optical media is gone? Do we think that we'll be getting to the point where we won't even be using USB sticks anymore? You know, because all this cloud proliferation.
Well, I do think that's probably the way of the future, but that's decades off, or at least fives of multiple years off. I mean, we should definitely be able to support that in the future, but I don't think that's on our roadmap for right now. You had a question, Nick.
I just have a more of a statement and something to think about as you guys consider larger image sizes. So I was talking with a couple of the server team guys before I came to this session, and they were trying to figure out which session to go to, and one of them mentioned, yeah, 1.5 gig isn't going to work for OEMs. So I think perhaps in the server world, there might be a better case to make with the server image to keep it constrained.
It's interesting because I had a discussion with a couple of server guys, and it was like, we're just going to do it because that's what's needed by the industry. If it's needed by the industry, it's a little different, but it's interesting. I hadn't quite heard that.
Yeah, and then...
Do you know what the reasoning was for?
I don't know, but if you talk to, I don't remember who it was, but if you talk, it was somebody that works with Al Stone, so...
Okay. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I'm actually a server guy. So, problem with a DVD is you don't really use DVDs to install servers, but that's also changing.
But more the size, like is the size a problem with the OEMs, or the DVD is a problem with the OEMs?
No, they were just arguing that for server it should be sticking at the current size limit.
Okay, so proceed.
It'd be nice to have an option to have a DVD, but I think most people would still just download the CD or even a Netflix and CD. But having a DVD with all the packages on there would be nice as well.
Okay.
If you want to pop out your archive with it.
So let me go through some of the counter arguments to moving that I've heard and see what people want to comment on that. One is software center is awesome. So I've heard that a lot of people think that there's no point in shipping a lot of this default software because software center is great, and that we should ship a minimal CD or a smaller CD and let people install stuff through software center if possible. Which there's a counter argument to that about live CD images. When you want to boot a live CD, like you want to have Thunderbird or LibreOffice or something like that, so they can experience it without having to install it or do that sort of thing. So there's two sides to that coin.
Recently, where we always built up the targeting more and more into countries that are less developed, let's say. So maybe DVDs are much less popular down there. And also, these are developed, you can download the stuff later. Yes, you can, but if you have a crappy internet connection, which is the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's the counter argument to that. So counter arguments spiral into other counter arguments and stuff. So
if you have a crappy internet connection, it's going to be a big download no matter what. So
but if your friend gives it to you on DVD, then you've got way more stuff on the DVD, and you don't have to worry about downloading.
So I think the friend giving it to you use case is a rather small one, and you could always argue that the solution there is create a bit of software to create a package for CD, which I think we already have.
Or you download it at your university or whatever, where there is bandwidth.
I think what we're really missing here is actual numbers. Like you say, what was that? The live CD case, right? Like, we don't actually know how popular the live CD is. We may find that people aren't really using live CDs anymore, that it was a useful thing when Ubuntu was first starting up because it was figuring out whether or not the hardware works, but now most people just want to install it and go. And I think if we're going to make a decision based around things like that, then we need actual numbers on things like that.
yeah, I also think that there's a little bit of a schizophrenia when it comes to who we want to target, because if we're targeting developing countries and people with slower connections, it would definitely take a different approach to some of our decisions as opposed to broadest user base or niche market or targeting and great consumers who install this on their own. Very simple, good point. Reading numbers. Okay, so another counter argument I heard was, Evan mentioned it, but expanding upon it was, if you move to anything that's not a physical limit, such as 700 meg, and then you impose a virtual limit of 750 meg, 800 meg, that discipline, while good in theory, goes out the window, and people will not be bound by that. Now, I do liken that to external and internal dependencies. External dependencies force people to make hard decisions, like startups with how much cash they've got and things like that. And sometimes when startups get too much cash, they just kind of, well, but my thought around that sometimes is that that's great when you're young, but at some point you have to learn to be driven by internal dependencies. Otherwise, you're not growing and maturing. So I see it both ways. I see that if we're at the point where we're mature enough as an organization and this community to maintain this, it's possible. But if we're not, it's not. So if we're still driven by external dependencies and we need that discipline, that's just a hard reality situation. But if we're maturing to the point where we can use our internal dependencies, or we can't. But I don't know if we're there. It's kind of the point of you were making about are we at that decision point? So most of the other arguments I'd heard have been brought up already. So counter arguments. So I'm curious what people generally think.
Well, kind of, one of the reasons that people want to have a larger image is to have more things installed by default. And it's true that you can go and install things with Software Center, but if you're installing a lot of computers or you're sending things to friends, you have a set of software that you always want. And then going through and having to always collect and install all those things individually is kind of a pain. So, what I'm wondering is there a different way we can solve that problem? Like, provide some sort of way for people to store a profile or whatever, that as soon as they finish installing, just click this and then it goes and grabs that data.
Yeah,
Software Center is doing that, isn't it?
One comp, but it's more per user. So like you have to sign up with your Software Center user ID.
Right.
So I imagine that wouldn't solve the problem Bryce is talking about, because it's, you don't want that person to share your Software Center ID.
Is it up landscape, doing that kind of stuff with it?
Landscape's more for deployment though, isn't it? Like this is like you log in Software Center, you've got 5 registered machines, you like sync my machines, all the apps that you've got.
Okay.
There's another, I saw another hand.
Well, you can always, if you're doing this for a bunch of friends or whatever, you just pick the packages on a stick with the script and install them. I mean, that's.
Oh, you said script.
Yeah.
Well,
That's basically what I do now.
yeah.
Just thinking that if it was done more.
So other people can, but how common a user case is, I mean, is that a common user case that is worth? Yeah, that's what.
That's the point about that. Sounds like Evan volunteered to get data. You'll learn quickly.
Yes, let's talk after this.
When you install RHEL or CentOS, after you're done with the installation in root's home directory, there's a kickstart script with all the packages that were selected. If you say you went and did an interactive install, you chose manually a bunch of random packages that you wanted. When you're done, there's basically a manifest that you can use to recreate that exact environment, and it's super trivial to do. It does require you to know how to point the distribution at Kickstart, but it could be simplified such that users who are relatively clueless could basically do the same thing.
Yeah, I seem to remember Android or something had something where after you finish installing or during installation, they gave you a set of 6 or 8 different, like server, desktop, so on. You click on that and it
So that's a very common, I think, idiom back like 8 years ago or something like that. Shoot, which you know, or a nail host or something like that. Pick a server one. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's like that's one of the use cases that we would have to identify with data. All right, any other comments or?
Are we sure that the USB image boots on all the USB, on all the kinds of target devices like you mentioned, MacBook Air? Do MacBook Air boot off USB?
Not, only OS 10. It's actually to be more precise, only EFI compatible OSs.
So you have to do a bit of monkeying to make a Mac compatible USB image.
Good luck. So the current problem is that the NVIDIA binary driver doesn't work with EFI. And so current Macs don't boot legacy BIOS off of USB disk. They need to be EFI.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that's actually one of the more critical ones. And I know that we're trying to solve that problem, but it's not relevant to DVD, which is more about the Mac locking it down in general. But
it's more that we're going for a USB stick as being the primary installation media, and the target is devices that don't have optical drive.
and here's Mark.
And where does the debate stand at present?
So we can summarize. We got a lot of good points, one way or the other. A lot of it is about the physical discipline and the speed of download. That's the pros and the cons there. Just moving to a bigger image. That one actually seems to be, I think, the minority opinion in the room.
What's that?
That moving to a bigger size would be better. I don't think I'm misrepresenting that. We didn't do an actual show of hands, but just my general feel from how the comments have been going. So, Mark, did you want to talk about your thoughts, Mark?
No, I mean, I think in the absence of physical discipline, it's very difficult for any one person to be the imposer of a physical limit, right? Because it's all arbitrary, it's totally a decision, and it's work to get things under a limit. So in that situation, I think it's very tough. You know, I have no problem being a difficult person, and I think what I'm reflecting in that is the voice of folk who have to download the platform rather than the voice of folk who have to create it. So I think it's clear we have to break out of the CD limit. My feeling is that, you know, rather than the conversation starting and saying, oh, 2 gig, which is another US common physical limit, less subspace, I think the conversation has to start at 700 meg plus what do we need, and recognize that everything else that we put in there is costing time for people to download. So I'd like to see arguments as to why it should be any more than 750.
Would you be okay with the idea that if 750 was new limit, breaking out of the CD as you mentioned, but we took a hard limit at 750, even though it's not a physical limit at that point, that's a mark limit?
It's a mark limit, yeah.
Okay.
It's not quite a law of physics, but
as close as we have in the room right now.
I guess there's always the argument for having room for more language packs.
These things are very difficult. For example, this is like politicians arguing about the budget.
Yeah.
They will always overspend because there's nobody, you know what I mean, until they hit a physical limit, and that gets messy. But yeah, that's another story. But the point is that there's no process in a room full of humans to trade these two things off, right? Everybody else's need is downloading versus the need of those who are sort of creating it. So it's one of those things that just requires somebody to be a bit difficult about it. And since I'm far away from the process, it must be easier for me to do that.
Do you have a sense, so there's kind of two options. We would probably keep 2 images. There's kind of two options. We could go down to 1.
Alternate and buy.
So, no, there's that. There's so what we have right now is 1 image with extra stuff on it, and 1 image where we try to keep it to 700.
Means the DVD and CD.
DVD and CD. So some of the options that have been bounced around are we could have the 1 image that's slightly over CD size and 1 image that we keep to like a hard like 500 to say this is just Unity plus the web browser. We keep it really small so that you don't have any trouble.
I mean, all of this is QA cycles. All of this is etc. etc. I'm not convinced of the value of a 4 gig image. What I would be potentially convinced. I don't know how we structure the 4 gig image. Do we structure the 4 gig?
It's gone. We just have the 1.5 and 700 for Lyric. We just have 1.5 and 700.
So what's the 1.5?
The 1.5 is basically the CD plus full language packs plus Inkscape, GIMP, and PityV. So 3 applications that are.
But how is that structured? Is it structured that stuff is installed in the live image, or is it structured that it's in var cache apt archives, or is it?
It's in the live image so that you get it.
You mean it's pre-installed essentially. So I think that that's an extra round of QA that we don't need to do. The argument that I've seen is that for people who are disconnected, if you can download once, having the 4 gig allows you essentially to install your choice of the pieces there. So that feels to me more like saying, okay, that is a normal CD image with main essentially in a directory of devs, which you can point apt at and say pull out of that. So does that sound?
Yeah.
So then there's essentially only one image that we have to QA, which is a 750 meg image, and your download may or may not have a bunch of other devs in a local archive essentially for offline app getting.
Would we not still need to QA that? Because, so like in the language pack case, the installer is going to want to go into that package pool and install them, and it's going to be a different code path than it is when they're not present.
True, fair enough, I get that, fair enough.
We
But,
do have a QA process for the 4 gig image. That's like, some automated tests, some steps that they run through.
Right, but that's different to QA sort of an image that has a different software load.
Yeah.
We're going to, yeah.
So I think the QA point's an important one though too, because we mentioned it a couple times in here. Every time you increase the size or increase the scope, we got a QA effort, 2 CDs, additional QA effort, more work, more places that we can miss something, things like that. So the experience can degrade overall. So I think it's a good point. I would be more of the opinion that I like to stay with 1 if possible. So having that 750 CD physical limit, but the mark limit one is something I could really get behind, but I don't know if anyone has a strong opinion one or the other.
Yeah.
What's struck good arguments.
I mean, if USB CD creator, for example, said, okay, USB creator, if that basically said, okay, point me at the USB stick and I'm going to put the image on the USB stick, and then you can say, do you want an extra app, archive? Yes. Do you want it with core GTK applications?
Right,
yes. Do you want it, or do you want it with all of main? You know what I mean? So it's just creating a little local apt archive. But the image is the image, and
that would actually build on tools that he did in the last cycle for localized images, where it's essentially you start with the CD image, and then you have some tools that let you add a few extra pieces. It wasn't intended to add extra apps, but it's just extra packages, so that could be.
Luke, I think you had a comment, Luke, about...
No, I was just agreeing with the 750 meg limit, that's all.
What level of compression do you guys use on the packages?
It depends on whether one it's a deb or it's the live file system. And if it's the debs, it's individual. Like LibreOffice sells ZMA, possibly going to switch to XZ, depending on what. I don't know, but the live file system is always ZLib.
Because on sort of whippier CPUs like ARM and Atom, decompression during install is actually taking quite a bit of time. So it's just a consideration. Potentially.
It's a one-time time, though.
I'm sorry?
It's a one-time cost.
That's very true, yes. But for a new user, or if you're trying to do it 500 times in parallel.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You mean for example, massively parallel cluster setup. You should be, that shouldn't take 5, it's in parallel, not in series. So that should, right, but that shouldn't.
It's not too bad.
No, it's not going to take much longer than doing one.
I also believe
at the same time.
Sorry. I also believe a lot of the ARM images for SD cards are actually already X4. So I don't think there's any decompression really there involved. The Ubuntu ARM guys can answer that probably, but I think they use X4 for the ARM images as it currently stands.
So it's a copy of a file system rather than a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there an underlying Union FS or Squash FS?
Not so far as I know, not for ARM. Like we use Squash FS, of course, for the live file system of x86. So there's decompressed time required there. But
for them, it's just kind of like, here's how you populate your root file system, blah, and then after that, it's a standard file system. You make changes to it or whatever.
It's
Are
actually
you populating it from
data,
devs, or which are compressed, or are you populating it from a...
I mean, root file.
root ball. Sounds like
It's like a
something
root
you
image.
pass around at a particular kind of party.
All right, any
Are there any
comments?
concerns, I didn't catch the first part, are there any concerns about losing compatibility with the CD install, about losing that ability to fit on a CD?
No, I don't know if anyone brought that up as a concern. Maybe someone thought it did say it. It seemed generally, and then when I was doing the rounds here, that was never brought up. I think everyone thinks that that a USB is the way to go anyway, and people are downloading the CD image, put it on the USB anyway.
I mean, I think the standard use case, the use case we really want to get right is I'm a Windows user. I want to go to a website, download a Windows app, stick in a USB key, reboot, and go.
Yeah.
You know, that's the path. That is.
Possibly.
So I was going to ask, do we have to drag Webby along with this? Because right now the Webby disk images are about 450 megs. It's a really small, quick download compared to 700 megs, gig and a half. Is it important that those images also have all the additional software that makes up the 1.5 gig image?
How is Webby smaller? Is it compressed?
Yeah, it uses, so it doesn't have all of the extra bits that make up the live CD infrastructure.
Do you know what
Because
this
it's
is?
just a disk image that gets written to disk and then ext resized into place. And it's XZ compressed. It ends up being significantly smaller.
But it's all the same. It's the same, essentially, applications and
Yeah,
experience
it's
and things
the
like
same
that.
thing as roughly the desktop CD.
So there's no work on somebody's part to create the Webby image. Just another image that gets created out of this process.
If I understand your question correctly, it's done off of Antimony as part of the live build infrastructure.
So
Can Webby, is the blob essentially just a compressed, you know?
ext3 disk image.
So could Webby create, if you took that and decompressed it and stuck it on the USB key, would it be bit for bit identical to what we're talking about shipping as the image?
When what would stick a bootloader in front of that?
And so I don't know the exact structure of what goes on the USB key,
Sure.
right? So I guess what I'm asking is the USB images, download an ISO,
Yeah.
download an ISO, then use a tool to write that ISO onto USB with some sort of supporting bootloaders and bits and bobs. If you download Webby, and could Webby essentially say I can either install straight to the Windows partition using this compressed blob that I've got, or I can write it to the USB key, and could the end result of that be exactly the same as what USB creator?
Because what USB creator would be running would be an installation image, right? It would have ubiquity, it would have the live CD infrastructure on small shiphouse. If Webby wrote this compressed disk image, what it would be doing is basically doing an install to the USB key. So you'd have a full copy of Ubuntu on the USB key, but you wouldn't be able to use it to install it to another computer.
Right. It wouldn't have the transcriptors.
Yeah.
Gene.
Does Webby still support conventional ISO installed with it, or is that been?
It's still there, yeah.
Right.
And it's still, if you have a CD in the drive and you run Webby, then it still uses the CD.
Okay.
But for the common case of just going to ubuntu.com/download, getting a really, really quick and really small Webby executable, it pulls down the disk.
Right.
So to answer your question, before you pull it along, I would assume that the end result, the desire for the end result of Webby is that someone has the Ubuntu installed on their system. I don't know if it's bit for bit, but it's basically the same experience you get. So, but if we can give them a smaller download because we don't have all that stuff and it's automatic, should have the same end result, but that's better.
It's stuck on a Windows partition there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And is there a mechanism to say, no, I actually really want this, use this as, go native essentially?
There's always been work plans, and we just never found the resources to get it done. Webby migration is something that Colin especially always wanted to see. The idea of taking the Webby image as a file and resizing the Windows partition down, creating a new partition, and running that code.
But to do that, you have to boot off a USB key or something. And you have to have something, you have to know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, you can get very clever and very dangerous with this. Like NTFS believes supports online resizing. So you could effectively...
You say that with a smile.
I've never known online resizing to work 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But when it works, it works. When it doesn't, sorry. I mean, yeah, it gets a bit complicated. I personally, I don't think a lot of people really have the desire to go from a Ruby install hosted inside Windows to do something more native, because there's just no obvious immediate benefit to do that. It's a bit faster. Don't really care if this works.
But I guess one thing we said about some of the markets was possibly using that Ruby disk image to go native directly, or go native post install Windows drive.
But I mean, so the other thing to consider here is that there are plans afoot to kind of make a little bit more of a download manager for Ubuntu so that it handles some of this USB writing and C writing and stuff.
Do you have a Wii session scheduled?
No, because we don't at present have anyone to do the engineering work on it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if the initial Ruby download was like a download manager essentially, and then said to you, look, we can install it, next to on top of Windows essentially, or we can install native. If you want to install native, it downloads the USB image, writes that to USB, tells you to reboot, takes the process. If you say install on top of Windows, it downloads the other image.
Yep.
That would make the initial download smaller as well. It means people are running a piece of software sooner.
And it gives us a solution finally for being able to ensure that the installation media is actually checksums and working.
Right.
Because if it's downloading the image and running it to disk, we can check it as they download it and as they read it to the disk.
Right.
Whereas before we were entirely reliant on external software, which usually got it wrong.
Right.
But this is taking this conversation one day off.
So given that it's an arbitrary limit, what's the process for you guys to have a sense and get a feel for whether that limit is the balance between, okay, it's going to require some effort to get under that limit versus it's just going to be a silly amount of effort to get under that, and here's what else we could do if we had that time.
With that number, still say 750, basically go talk to Martin, grab him, sit down in front of a computer and say 750, come back in a couple minutes and tell us. And 7, he can probably bang our heads together for a little bit and figure this out.
Do you have a feel for this, Seb?
I'm not even sure we need more space this cycle. It's going to be like over time, depending on like our application evolve, what library we need to bring in, and like how the world is changing on us.
So there's a possibility where we say we're not going to ship a CD image anymore, it's going to be USB only, but we're keeping the size the same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Ruby stuff.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers, Jason. Thank you.
Evan, you said no Wii session because we don't have anyone to work on Wii.
Yeah.
Is that because we haven't found someone to work on Wii? Because I thought we had a headcount open for that, and I'm not sure.
So Steve is the person to talk to them about this.
Fair enough.
But my understanding at present is that we have a new design for Webby that largely turns it into a download manager for Ubuntu. It handles, for Windows users, they'll go to ubuntu.com and they'll get the Webby image, and then that will come up and guide them through either creating a USB disk or CD, or just doing a Webby install. Steve is trying to hire a Windows developer to largely take on Webby and handle Windows programming for the Foundations team. But I don't believe any progress has been made on that front yet. And Colin and I are off working on other things than the installer this cycle.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll talk to Steve about that offline. Hang on one second, it's my turn. So backing up to, anyone have a problem with what Mark said?
What did Mark say? I kind of said.
Removing the limit of the physical CD, going to 750 meg limit, but a USB image, essentially.
And I think the other pieces that I take away are, so in the answer to how we deal with wanting to have an additional package, like wanting to have an install image, you can take, this is Bryce's point, I think, especially around Inkscape. If you want to have an image that has like 5 more packages, then the tools that Pity was working on in the last cycle are the way to do that. And they give you a really simple interface for saying, make me an image, just add these 10 packages. So
it's not exactly user friendly in terms of, like, everyone in this room could probably use it, but not the community.
I think of the people who are likely to be creating their own images, it's good enough for now. I know Debian has a neat, I think it's a web interface.
Yeah, I
that
saw
you
it.
just type in what you want and it creates an image for you. We're not very one of my main concerns from that is sort of one of the targets for the 1.5 gig image is our USB keys that we ship with Ubuntu, and getting that to be a richer experience. But I'm pretty sure we can do that using Plymouth tools.
Yeah, I think we could do, we definitely achieve
And
that.
we actually ran into some problems in this cycle on the fact that we had the 1.5 gigabyte image, the tests were almost the same as the CD image, but not quite, and it was extra QA load. So I like the idea of merging those down to the one image plus the tools for the packages you want.
I'm a big fan of that too. I like the idea of reducing options for a better experience.
Are we talking about getting rid of an ISO as the final? I have a computer, for instance, that can't boot from USB. So I would like to have a DVD installer still.
I don't actually know
Is that
how
what we're
physically.
talking about then?
It would be a DVD you could boot from though, right?
Yeah, I can boot from DVD.
So it's removing the physical
is it
CD
just a
on-
disk image or?
Actually,
So there's still
It's
one
basically
ISO
just,
966.
it's
Okay.
keeping the same image, but making it slightly larger than would fit on the CD, but that would mean you could burn it to a DVD.
Okay.
That's, that's an option.
You're not getting rid of the netboot ISO though.
I'm sorry?
The netboot ISO?
I don't understand the question. What was the question?
Are you getting rid of the netboot ISO?
I don't
It's only
think we would,
a
but-
change to the CD DVD parity.
It would just be a different target.
I don't have an NetBoot ISO, that's in the case of Debian at least.
No,
No,
we
we
do
do.
for server.
Okay.
How about the old DVD image, the old 4 gigabyte DVD image that has the full pool on it? Do we want to bring that back? Because we actually retired that in the last
I don't-
cycle.
I don't think it. So that allowed you to do a live or an alternate install.
Yeah, or server, actually. It was live also
Right.
and
Yeah,
server
yeah,
all
that's
in
right,
one.
yeah.
It was very hard to test because it took so long to download, but then coming back to that time the next day's DVD.
Yeah.
Okay, so then one thing I would like to explore this cycle is whether that tool for getting the CD image plus a set of packages, if we could make an easy version of that, like make sure that works for the, give me an image, like I've got an 8 gigabyte USB stick, I just want an image that has the full pool on it. If we can maybe provide an option in that tool for that.
That would also be useful for people with restricted internet access. You just need one friend who's got really good internet and a 32 gig stick, and you could say, give me everything. You can put the full archive on a 32 gig stick.
Dear God.
I've done this.
Yeah, we have the seed already defined, so it's just a question of let's connect that seed with Pitty's tool and build the image.
It's great to be able to walk up to the CD and boot off it and install anything from the repository. With no net connection.
We also need to consider the situation of mirrors, because right now many mirrors, even though the ones in especially in developing countries, over there, even though the mirrors may be fast, for some reason download speeds are still low, maybe because the bandwidth of the mirrors are limited. So
There's not much we can do about that though. I mean, we've
we
already
can
certified
increase the
that.
number of mirrors. We can improve the mirrors.
I would have thought the disk space issue, or just actually disk space on the mirrors would be more an issue.
We do have an IS and a mirror issue if we dramatically increase the size of disks and things like
Also,
that.
does Police Tool allow you to export an ISO that you could, like if someone wants to just wanted to create a large 32-bit or everything? That's
So its intended purpose right now, what it does right now, is it creates an ISO that has the specific language packs that you want and maybe a couple of extra applications. So you can do like a French localized CD or, so it's specifically intended for regional language and a couple of extra applications.
Yeah, so I think for that use case, you could use that tool to create a country-specific one with everything you need in that country, and it wouldn't be every mirror.
So the thing is like, so the tool is like putting everything on the CD, so like everything is going to be installed on the system. It's not like getting an apt pull with the depths on the CD, which like you can use to install later. It's like going to dump everything on your disk, which might
So
not
that's
be.
what I'm not sure of, if that tool can be extended to handle the big
You need the extra tool. You need to be able to have the extra FTP archive and stuff like that. Yeah, because at the moment it sounds like it just literally grabs the ISO, unpacks the live file system, adds the stuff, recompresses the file system, and just changes the metadata on the actual image to package list and stuff. So it could be, it just means you need extra tools.
Unfortunately, Pity isn't in the room because there's an LTS planning session going on.
Well, I also think that that one might be one of those, it's a nice to have for this discussion. Is also more about the ways of the limit. So I think for all intents and purposes, we're essentially done here, though. Unless anyone has any final comments. Did anyone take notes by chance? I didn't open up my laptop.
We'll just block the OMG you went through about it.
All right, so that'll be from the blueprint, the link to OMG Ubuntu. All right, we're so screwed.
Actually, in the ODS cycle, we moved the usual standard ISO to a hybrid one, which we can stick over to USB drive. And we lost some 2 or 3 MB. Colin must be doing more about it. 2 or 3 MB of space we lost because of this. And at the end, we ended up with some MB still remaining. So this cycle, I doubt if we are even going to cross that. So that's
that's what Seb was saying anyway. This I think it was more discussion about future and getting off of the CD and going to the USB image and moving past that. But using Mark as the physical force of nature that he is, and saying the Mark limit as opposed to the CD limit.
And it's also trivial to actually extend the CD image process to actually tell us that we're over that specific limit as well. So.
No, we didn't have any session notes. Do we want to quickly write some stuff?
Yeah, it'd be great. Does anyone have these pad open?
I have it now, so.
Okay. I mean, it's just basically we talked about the pros and cons. I could fill in some of the pros and cons, and everyone can if they want, but just say that we, for expression Mark, we're talking about removing the physical CD limit, going to the USB, or I guess the DVD image with a Mark target size of 750 meg max. Does that about summarize what everyone heard?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can log on OMG about this if this is going to be an immediate change or precise.
I don't think it's going to be changed for precise.
Yeah, that's right. So I can write about it that it will be considered for the future.
I don't think it should be written about until we actually know we're going to consider it.
I'd like to get Martin just to do his thing for a little bit. Tell us what's going on with what languages and stuff. And it says Seb said we may not actually need it. I just like the idea that we talked about it a little bit. Martin brought it up. Okay. Cool. I think that's good, Jeremy. I think we're fine with that. Just those notes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Talk to Mark about his language script thing.
Martin?
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, again, I think that's
Ubuntu defaults to builders and PPK. That's been discussed.
I think what he meant was the thing that Allison was talking about Martin's ISO language, ISO localization
Ubuntu
thing.
defaults builders and PPK.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's not directly related to this session, but the decision in this session has some implications along that.
And I do think that's a low priority for this cycle too, to see if we need to tweak that for a certain thing. But it is something to note in case we do find a need for it. Cool. Lunch?
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.